Alrighty, so today we're going to do the season preview of St. Louis City, who is coming into their second season after an incredible Cinderella expansion season where they break all sorts of record in the regular season. But obviously, we know that they definitely had a bit of a bittersweet ending to their expansion season, or if you're a very pessimistic St. Louis fan, you would say it's a very bitter ending in terms of their magical expansion season, losing in the first round against their hated rival against Sporting KC. And now it's going to be interesting to see how the second season is, especially when we get to talk about the expectation of this team that, as much as I know, a lot of St. Louis fans want to see more of what they see last season. It's not going to be easy, especially with the way that we have seen before. Teams have suffer second year syndrome, and that the sophomore slump can definitely be a real thing in regards to a team in MLS. But that being said, last season, as I mentioned, it was a magical expansion season, 17-5-12 with 56 points. And while they didn't get as much points total as LAFC did in their expansion year, which is kind of crazy to say because at one point we thought St. Louis was going to easily break that record, but they did kind of suffer a bit of a down in form throughout the season. But they did finish first in the Western Conference, and even though that's pretty low amount of points to win the Western Conference, last year the West was just a gong show at times where you could maybe say St. Louis kind of won it outright, even though they were definitely the dominant team from the beginning in terms of the top part of the standings of the West. Now, their last playoff appearance, obviously, it's last year, and then their last playoff round wins. Well, they never did because they've just made it to the playoffs that season, and again, as I said, it's an unfortunate end for them losing to Sporting KC in the first round, and then of course the last MLS Cup, they never won it because they're not the Chicago Fire from 1998 that remains as the only expansion team to ever win the MLS Cup in their first season. And no, that does not include the Houston Dynamo. The Houston Dynamo, I know they did it in 2006, but keep in mind that is a team that, of course, was a relocation team from the San Jose Earthquakes, and as a Quakes fan, still a little bitter because of that. But in terms of some of the transfer that they done, so they did make some signings, at least recently, with bringing guys like Nicholas Dare, Thomas Totlin, and Chris Durkin, and mostly upgrade in terms of the fullback position, which was kind of an area where they were definitely needing to upgrade. Consider when you look at the structure that the St. Louis team run, we know that Bradley Cardinal loves to run this energy drink kind of soccer and likes to push men forward, especially his fullbacks. Well, unfortunately, last season we have seen where when he does push some of his fullbacks up forward, some of his fullbacks doesn't really have that ability to really track back immediately to basically cover for those areas. So that's why you see sometimes where the one of the key thing about this St. Louis team is one, just make sure you don't play right into the press, and two, if you can find some space in the overlapping being area, or if you play the ball over the top, then you can definitely solve this St. Louis City team. And there's time and time again where teams have tried to do that, and that's why that's kind of one area that they want to focus, where they don't want to make sure they're leaving too much gap in the flank and getting exposed in the flank time and time again. But they also added Chris Durkin in this team. So Chris Durkin, I was kind of surprised that DC decided to move on from him, but now he's with St. Louis, and I think that should be a really good addition because we talk about proven MLS talented players that we see teams trying to get via an interleague trade. That's kind of the case with Chris Durkin. He's a proven MLS talent. He did really well doing his time with DC, and I feel like he's going to do the same thing with St. Louis City. And in the draft, they signed a Japanese player in Jose Kajima from Wake Forest. Now, in terms of players that is no longer with the team, there definitely were a couple of noticeable names that's no longer in the name on this team. I think the most notable name is Nicholas Giacchini, as it was official that he is actually going to be going to this club called Como in Serie B. And it's kind of a shame the fact that they couldn't keep him for another season because Giacchini really had a good season and really kind of an unexpected good season too, because one João Klaus went down last season. We were not expecting him to carry the way in terms of that number 9 position, but man, did so well in terms of that. And I think he did so well that it feels like maybe he's thinking he's ready to go back to Europe and get another shot at it, and we'll see whether or not if he can do well now that he's going to be going back to Europe and going to Italy. They also let go of John Nelson, and they also let go of Max Schneider. And then another big name that they let go is Jarrett Stroud. This was also a bit of a surprising one because Jarrett Stroud, I thought he had a really good season, probably his best season that he had in MLS, and that's even better than when he was with the Red Bulls because when he was with those Red Bulls team, he was decent as well. But last season, by far one of his best season, and I was kind of surprised that they decided let him go. Though again, that being said, getting Chris Durkin from DC United, and I think that this is part of the trade where they decided to give Jared Stroud to DC, and then in exchange of getting Chris Durkin and some general allocation money. I think it's still kind of like a win-win situation for both of these teams because for St. Louis getting Chris Durkin, as I mentioned, a proven MLS talent in the defensive midfield position, and then DC getting Jared Stroud, a guy that has looked really good last season in the fullback position for the St. Louis team. They also won't have Lucas Bartlett, and then recently they decided to loan Miguel Perez in the USL Championship side. I think it was Birmingham Legion that they loaned him to. And I've said this before, as much as I know Miguel Perez kind of had a bit of a breakout season last year, I do think that he's not ready yet in terms of getting regular starting minutes for his St. Louis side, and that if he does get some more experience with Birmingham Legion, and especially have a breakout year with that club, there's no doubt that St. Louis is looking to try to get him back, and that he could have some regular starting minutes as a result of that. But other guys that they let go is Isaac Jensen and Simir Pidrum. Now, in terms of the preseason schedule, they already played one preseason, and it was against Nashville SC on January 26th. It was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams. Their next preseason game is on February 3rd. It's against the LA Galaxy. This game is going to be at Dignity Health Sports Park. Then they play against LAFC, and I believe this game is supposed to be a closed door game, even though I didn't label there. Oh, actually, no. I'm sorry. This is not a closed door game. This is part of the Coachella Valley Invitational. How can I forget about the Coachella Valley Invitational? Consider I'm actually going to be going to one of those days for the Valley Invitational, and the same goes for February 10th as well. I forgot to write that down as well, where they play against the Red Bulls, and then the only closed door game is them playing against Louisville City on February 15th, and that's the last game before they prepare for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which, as I said before, this is one of the 10 teams that are involving the CONCACAF Champions Cup. In fact, the next 10 season preview that I'm going to do, or now the next 8 season preview I'm going to do, are going to be involving team that is going to be playing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Now, for St. Louis, it's kind of interesting because they are actually involved in an all MLS first round in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. And, if you're a St. Louis fan, I guess maybe you're a little disappointed that you're in an all MLS kind of CONCACAF Champions Cup, especially against a really good MLS team that is the Houston Dynamo. Like when you're in this competition, you're expecting to face against teams that is from different region, and it feels like that should be very interesting to see them face against some of the most interesting opponent, or even some of the stronger opponent in the CONCACAF region. But no, instead they get the Houston Dynamo, a team that they're going to play a lot more in the regular season as well. So yeah, it's a bit of a letdown. And I will say the same thing about the Dynamo when I do talk about them in the season preview, and I'll probably will talk about them right after when I finish this season preview. But yeah, leg one is going to happen on February 20th, and then leg two is going to be happening in February 27th. In fact, I mentioned how Vancouver, they're the first team to be playing the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Not only that is the case, but pretty much from now on, all these teams that play in the CONCACAF Champions Cup is going to be playing leg one just a couple of days before the season began. I actually didn't realize that was the case, but apparently this season, when it comes to the first round of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, they kind of split it into two parts. Where in part one they have certain teams play their two-legged affair, and then the very next after that they have a couple more teams, or the remaining team in the first round, to play their two-legged affair. It's kind of a weird schedule if you ask me, but it'll at least give a lot of these teams times in the preseason to prepare for them to play in the first game of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, because we have always said about how MLS team does have a disadvantage when it comes to playing these CONCACAF Champions Cup in the middle of the preseason, or even near the end of the preseason. Now, when you look at the first 10 games for St. Louis, so they play their first game at home against RSL, then they get to play against NYCFC for the first time on March 2nd. Then they go on the road to play against a game that I'm pretty sure St. Louis fans have remember this game. This was the game where they play their first ever game against Austin FC, and they were able to come back to win that one and become the first team to win their inaugural game as an expansion team since LAFC did it against Seattle back in 2018. Then they play against DC United at home before going on the road to play against RSL. So yeah, they're pretty much going to be done with RSL relatively quickly. But then they play against Dallas, and then they play against Austin FC, and then this is where we get our first soccer capital derby. I mean, I don't even know if that's actually the name of the rivalry, but with the way that both of these teams seems to claim that they are the actual soccer capital, and also Portland fans would like to also have a word with that. Yeah, this is going to be interesting when they do play against Sporting KC, and then after that, they get to play against the team that they're going to be playing in the CONCACAF Champions Cup in the two-legged affair against the Houston Dynamo. And something tells me, I think by then they would not like each other. I mean, if there's one thing about when you play against the same team, and especially the same team so many times, there's going to be some hate between both teams, knowing the fact that this season they're going to be playing four times this year, and could be more, depending on if they're going to be playing against each other again in the playoffs or even in the U.S. Open Cup. Now, when you look at the last 9 games, and I decided to go to the last 9 games because if I go 10 games, I would include the game before the Leeds Cup break. So from now on, in terms of the second bracket, I'll just talk about teams that are all the games that is post League Cup break. So in the post League Cup break, they get the Portland Timbers to start on the road as their first game post League Cup. Then they get the Galaxy at home before they get New England on the road. So yeah, obviously the schedule is definitely not easy for St. Louis for early on. But they do get to play against Minnesota, and then they play the San Jose Earthquakes on the road. But then it just gets tougher again. They play Sporting KC at home, play LAFC on the road. They play against the Houston Dynamo, and that of course is the final time that they play against the Houston Dynamo before on decision day they're going to be playing against Minnesota United on the road. So again, that's a really tough stretch to end the season. There's a lot of really good team, and especially teams that made it to the playoffs and probably could be in the playoffs again this season to finish up the schedule. Now, when you look at the strength of the St. Louis City side, it's got to be the structure and also the goalkeeping. And when I meant the structure, I meant that energy drink kind of soccer that Bradley Cornell implement. They looked really good last season under that, and I think it's no surprise that last season with them breaking all-star record, it's a lot to do with the fact that they already had a structure and already had a plan of how they, of course, play. Now, as I mentioned before, it's not a guarantee that it will work out well, but man, did it work out to a treat, to a point where you can clearly see that these players enjoy playing the system that Bradley Cornell implemented. And then, of course, the goalkeeping is definitely a strength because they did had the defending goalkeeper of the year in Roman Berkey, and he's going to be a guy that is going to be good again heading into this season. I mean, we knew he was good when he came into the league, and he basically showcased that in the inaugural season for this St. Louis City side. Now, that being said, in terms of weakness of this team, I talk about the structure and how good it is. Well, one of the issue I will say about this structure with this energy drink kind of soccer play is that there were teams that were able to find that out how to play that system throughout the season, and I'm just worried that heading into this season, this is where it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if Bradley Carnell is going to to try to try, try to kind of take trying to tinkle with the system a little bit so that it's not so predictable. Because again, when you face against the St. Louis side, the key to trying to unlock this team by playing this energy drink kind of style soccer is that if you can beat the initial show press, you're basically are able to find a lot of space at the back, and not to mention, if you are just gonna sit back and allow St. Louis to trying to get the ball and trying to play, have them to see if they can break you down. They aren't able to show last season a lot that they were able to be very successful in terms of breaking teams down. So that's kind of one of the things that I'm a little concerned about the structure, and this is also where they really need a number 10. And I mentioned before, yes, they have a good good deep line playmaker in Edouard Leuven. Probably one of the best deep line playmaker, if not the best deep line playmaker in the league. But if they want to propel themselves to the next level, they need a DP10. And especially with the way that they have a DP spot open, I would assume maybe they might think about expanding it this off season. And then the other thing is that they need some more depth in the roster, especially in the midfield and defense. I would say maybe in the striker position too, because since they like to go two striker up front, with the way that Giacchini is no longer there, they only are down to Jao Klaus and Adeniran in terms of the striker position. And while they can definitely run with both of those guys on the same pitch, ideally they want to have some depth in terms of the forward group, but that goes the same in terms of the midfield and in the defensive area too. And this is not a big surprise when I mentioned depth is one of the things that a team that just came into the league need to figure out, because usually when we see an expansion team coming to the league, they don't usually have the most staff, or at least the best staff, because of the limited amount that they can spend on building their roster. So that's going to be one thing that I think St. Louis is going to try to continue to build on. But in terms of the expectation for this season, obviously I know there's going to be St. Louis fans that's going to have unrealistic expectations saying that this year is going to be the same as last year. But as we have seen before, every single season it can be different, and it's always hard to try to keep yourself at the highest level. Now, if they do finish first again, or at least in the top four, I would not be surprised, because I think that just shows that this St. Louis team is a really good team and could be a competitive team throughout the next couple of years. But what you don't want to do is to have a second year syndromes. And that what you also don't want to do is to have a bunch of your players start to underachieve, because I think if there's one thing we know about St. Louis last season, a lot of their players were definitely playing either above their expectation and above their weight. But what happened if they don't achieve that? What happened if they end up to be similar to what we saw Austin did, where Austin had an incredible second season, but then the very next year all their players underperform, and also God forbid, if they have some injury concern, and we kind of saw last season where they had to go through injury concern, they started to drop points and started to be a little bit out of form because they don't have those replacement. That's going to be interesting to see how the St. Louis side can deal with, and this again goes back to where they need depth in their roster, and quality depth that is. And then of course avoid the second year syndrome and also make the playoff again. I mean, after an incredible first season, the only way to do it is that get another playoff appearance, and maybe even win a playoff round, and maybe even get revenge against Sporting KC if they both of them will meet each other again in the playoffs for this upcoming season. But there you have it. That is pretty much it looking at St. Louis City. And if you're a St. Louis fan, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this season preview, and what do you think is your strength and your weakness, and what's your expectation heading into this season for this team. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.